Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we'll bring you day 266 of this Russian invasion into Ukraine, with Olexiy Arestovych, advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel, and Mark Feygin, Russian opposition politician. In today's stream, they discuss situation on the front, new developments near Pavlovka on the south, and possible Russian pincer movement near Zaporozhye, continuous fallout from two missiles hitting the territory of Poland, results of G20 summit, more unintended consequences and outcomes of massive missile barrage by Russia onto Ukraine, and first results from new Ramstein meeting. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all. It is Wednesday, November 16th. Time is 10 minutes past 10 in Kiev and 2 minutes past 11 in Moscow. We are starting the usual stream, day 266 with Olexiy Arestovich. Olexiy, glad to see you. Hi, Mark. Good evening. We have over 110,000 people watching us live. About 20,000 of you clicked the like button. Thank you to all those who are staying with us for the last several months and continues to watch our streams, and the ones who don't subscribe. Mark, they may be afraid the Russian patrols, if they get stopped, they'll be probably checking a subscription to Feigin and Arestovich. That's a possibility. That's a definite possibility. Well, at least you can subscribe and then unsubscribe at the end of it. Because, being subscribed to Arestovich in Russia, that's actually quite a story. I think there is a list of enemies they published. In Wikipedia, you're listed as the enemy number one. You're somewhat like Otto Skorzeny. Sort of. Alright, let's take a dive into what happened in the last 24 hours. Let's start with map. Perhaps something changed there. Some of the evil tongues started saying that Russian troops started movement in Zaporozhye and possibly going for offensive. No details, but this plan could be possibly a rather painful one. Do you think these are the ones that were moved from Kherson? Partially, and they also had another group already stationed there. So remember when they withdrew the forces from the north? They're coming back to the same idea that they used earlier, big pincer, small pincer movement. So if you zoom out, you can take a look. There is likely a bigger pincer movement, a motion to that movement to encircle the whole remnants of Donetsk region. So we cannot exclude that the chess master, who likes to play e2, e4, will continue to play that move again over and over. So, as an ideation, that could be a rather painful maneuver for us. I'm not talking about their capability to fulfill that ideation, but as we talked earlier, they may have changed some troops to liberation of Donetsk and Lugansk regions to perhaps present it as success of this war. Donetsk and Lugansk regions, they suffered for 8 years. We finally added our brothers from Donetsk and Lugansk. We do not leave our friends without help, so they can play that card in their public opinion internally, and they'll continually attempt to capture Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and they'll be throwing whatever they have to try to annex them. All right. That is Zaporozhye, Gulay-Pole area. What about Pavlovka and Ugledar? Very heavy fighting. We are fighting. We are protecting our land. Pavlovka and Ugledar is quite an idea too, because from there, if you draw the line up north, from that green area down at the bottom where the red arrow is, you'll reach the yellow road and Kurakhova, which is right behind Marinka. the region where we defend their attempts to advance very successfully, so that could be part of that ideation too. As for the front from Marinka all the way up to Belogorovka, they continue their efforts without much result. We push them back, but they keep sending waves of people daily. 3 to 4 waves, and it's not an accumulated group like they did in the south near Pavlovka and Ogledar. These are smaller waves that they just keep wasting. That's about all. Sumy and Chernigov continue being shelled from Russian territory, and in Belarus they continue aggregating troops slowly. Okay. What about Kherson direction? We heard that Ukrainian means are continuing their barrages and their attacks on the Russian positions on the left bank. Yes, we do. We are not giving them any respite. We're continuing to hit their targets. We hit a lot, hit accurately, and the results are inspiring. We cannot publish all of those, but just in the last 24 hours we hit very good targets. Do they continue to move assets further away from the border? Yes, Mark, but you cannot move everything away. There are some stationary objects that are very important for the front infrastructure. You cannot move airfield, right? You need to continue using it to stock some stuff there and continue using it with your equipment and planes. So there'll be things flying into it. Does it make sense for them to continue using the Chaplinka airport? It's in the right corner of this map at about 5 o'clock. It's the closest one to the Kherson front, so they still have use for it. And again, it is risky, but it's the people who, by the way, provided us with 34 episodes of Chernobyevka, where we hit them 34 times during this war. So they continuing to do that. There's not much brain in the heads of their military leaders. So let's go back and look up and look in the border with Belarus. Today, official Belarus spokespeople accused Ukraine of blowing up some of the bridges on the border with Belarus and Volhynia region. Is the probability of Moscow attack increasing? No, not yet. Is it the same? There is no principally growing number of troops. They are growing them, but so slowly. And it's a question. Those armies that are training and the training centers from the mobilized, are they going to be thrown from Belarus to Volhynia region, or they're going to be thrown to Donetsk and Lugansk? Right now they have about 10,000. 10,000 up north is almost nothing. Ideally, to be able to at least report something, they need 20,000, 30,000 troops there. But we are working to prevent anything in the north, because nobody wants to repeat that war mistake from the first days when they crossed the border without much punishment. So, you think, like you stated earlier, that Lukashenko will continue evading direct participation in this war? By all means, right? Yes, I'm still of that opinion, and by the way, these are our bridges that we're blowing up. If they want to take revenge on us, they can blow up some of their own bridges. It's very interesting when Belarus border guards are trying to tell us what to do on our territory. And by the way, these bridges and what we do with them is defensive measures. So why being upset? It's only Russian army, by the way, who would blow up a bridge and then try to cross the river in that area where they blew it up. We don't do these stupid things. We do it for defense. Okay, yesterday, without having full information that is coming to light, preliminary, looking at what was published, we discussed the missile incident on the territory of Poland. Today we know a little more. We also heard today that Poland and some NATO experts and Biden made a statement that most likely, again, this is not a final determination, but the missile might have been a Ukrainian S-300 that might have been used to shoot down the Russian missile. Ukrainian side haven't taken responsibility for it yet, and Danilov, the Secretary of National Security Council, stated that they do want to be included in the international expertise group to get access to the information. And of course, international authorities already put the blame on Moscow. That's understandable with the whole conflict, but what can you comment on this? I don't think I have much to add. I know that President has also expressed his opinion that he would like to have Ukrainian experts to be part of that investigation, because he, and again I'm using his public statement, said that he has concerns that it was only Ukrainian missile, probably not only Ukrainian missile. So what eventualities we have here? We are trying to be open. We would like to be reciprocated by our allies and want to go take a look. Is it our missile? Is it our missile and Russian missile, or is it not our missile? So there are three options that we can think of, right? We just have a right to know, because even with tracing all the reasons and consequences of that event, we still want to understand if it is indeed was our missile, so we can take proper actions. So you think Ukraine would be allowed to that commission? I don't know, I'm not ready to say. Do you think if it turns out to be just Ukrainian missile, it will affect any of your relations with the West? No, I don't think it will. The West is the culture and discipline of thought. Culture is to understand things, and discipline to not get distracted. And they're pretty good at determining the causation. So it's not just about who is guilty, but who, how, and why. Because different crimes, different situations can be qualified with different degrees and different levels of punishment. I think Scholz made a statement yesterday earlier than Poles, and he said that regardless if it is Ukrainian missile or not, the side that's to be blamed is the one that started military aggression against Ukraine, because Ukraine is not just shooting missiles left and right for no reason. So reaction from Moscow was interesting. Just 15 minutes after that news broke, they started running to different microphones and making different statements that it's not ours, it's definitely Ukrainian. And some of the experts saw in this haste response the fact that Moscow is really afraid to deal with NATO. Of course they are afraid. One thing is to scream for 9 months that we're fighting with NATO and not Ukraine. And when the war is on the verge of breaking out or growing into the war with NATO, they're screaming, no, it's not us. It's Ukraine. Do you think this is another proof that Moscow continues to exploit the propaganda myths about them fighting the West? Yeah, you know, they have interesting... Of course it's that. And even funny incidents I've seen today, when the same NATO, the same author in Russia, in the same publication, and two different articles, and one of them says that we are fighting NATO, and the other is, this is not us, that should not be taken as escalation as the fight against NATO. So that's whom we're dealing with, schizophrenic military criminals. Kuleba yesterday commented, after that massive missile barrage on Ukraine, somebody in the media, in the public field, again called for both sides to sit down and negotiate. And Kuleba retorted that, let's not call upon us to sit down and talk with military criminals. let's not cover these actual events into something that they're not. Well, that's basically, we continue watching that schizophrenic reaction in Russia. They are playing both sides. They're fighting with the world, and then they're afraid, and no, that's not ours. I don't know how one can cancel the fact that Russia attacked Ukraine according to Putin's order and decision. Well, how, Mark? They are playing the card that they were forced to attack. Otherwise, in 4 hours, there would be Americans, NATO, and everything exactly like Soviet Union said about Afghanistan. Do you remember? Yeah, 1970s. Soviet Union made very exact statement about their invasion into Afghanistan. They had to go. 300,000 are watching us. About a third, as usual, click the like button. We have some time still, so please continue sharing stream to the interwebs to get more people connected. Another thing I wanted to touch upon, today G20 summit is concluding. Do you think it managed to fulfill the expectations? That Russia perhaps will be discommunicated at the summit, and there would be no bows or no gestures in regards to Russian delegation, Lavrov, or anybody else visiting it. I don't think he basically left before the summit started. He left on the morning of, or right before that started. So he basically tested the waters, figured nobody's going to talk to them, nobody will concede anything, and he probably was there to play some information reasons, maybe get some statement that nothing is so clear-cut. When all that failed, and nobody wanted to join Russia and call upon Ukraine to sit down and negotiate, when the masks were off and they failed to achieve anything, they decided that they can continue their old strategy and continue missile attacks on Ukraine. So that was a face slap to the leaders of G20. I remember somebody made a statement about progress and continuing development towards negotiations. Here's an answer from Moscow. Missile barrage on civilian targets. I don't think there is a clear message to G19 at this point. Now it's up to these countries to make some statement. So do you think the fact that there were no radical documents punishing Moscow or pointing finger at Moscow as a result of the summit? Well, there are some cursing war in general, but not Russian Federation action and role in it. Well, look at G20. There are a lot of countries that would like to use Russian resources in that group. There is India, there are a bunch of other countries. It's not G7 with China and States. It's a different group. You know, I just was expecting that maybe there'll be countries joining from G20 to the collective West. You know, Russia is the peddler of anti-colonial rhetoric, and even China supports that to a degree. And this is rhetoric that is rather appealing to a lot of countries in the world that are not part of the Western group, because the statement that you are laid back, your economy is where it is, and all is going on is because the West was exploiting your resources and your labor and your opportunities. It is very appealing to a lot of politicians in a lot of countries, and there are some bigger players like China who also do not want the United States and collective West to win clearly. They would rather take some partial defeat by the West to improve their own messaging. So G20 includes a lot of developing countries, that need Russian resources, that also like to use a certain ideological reasoning to explain where they are developmentally. And Russian Federation, even in their current condition, can provide enough support, starting with energy, some weapons supply. Earlier back in the day, they could supply some technology, probably not anymore, but these countries are still embracing inertia, where they somewhat make statements against war, but not sharp. The statements are pretty dull, and they don't really point finger at Russia. Take Turkey, for example. Turkey blames the war, doesn't like the war, but they're not accusing Russia of blatantly starting this conflict in their statements, even though Turkey understands real well what's going on, acts as intermediary between two countries, and capitalizes on the ongoing situation. Alright, to continue this topic, we have another comparative table that is alive on the web. It's a comparative table of massive attacks, massive barrages in Ukraine. The previous big one and the recent. Do you think, according to this analysis, how effective was air defense system? I cannot really see it well, Mark. It's a small picture on the stream. Let me send it to you. My aide Konstantin will send that to you. Okay, he sent it in Skype. Okay, let's see.
Снова в нашем скайпе. В нашем скайпе нет. Нам надо место.
No, I'm not seeing that. Not yet. Okay, yeah, it got through.
Вижу. Так, ну,
okay.
Да, 10-е, значит, 84-96.
10th versus 11th, 84 missiles against 96. They are not putting S-300 in the yesterday's shelling, although they were part of it. A lot of UAVs were used last time, 22 versus 12. Shot down 43 missiles last time, 77 this time. So the effectiveness of Western air defense systems is definitely growing. 23 victims and 105 wounded from the previous attack, and 3 versus 17. So one can see that the effectiveness of air defense system is definitely growing, and this is a good message that, in my opinion, should make Russian leadership think about perspectives of these hits. So one can make a conclusion that you need more UAVs. Sorry, you need more air defense systems. For example, NASAMS, they, as far as I know, shot down all 10 targets that were on their radar. Yeah, they did. And if you had more of them, you'd probably shoot down all of the missiles. Well, I don't think we can talk in absolutes, but we definitely would increase the number of successful hits on the attacking missiles. Well, Mark, also Europe also made statement yesterday, collective Europe, in the face of NATO, that our goal is to provide Ukraine with jointly supported air defense system that will protect their territory better. And of course, NASAMS is much more difficult to lose control of, so it falls on the territory of Poland, for example, versus the old Soviet S-300s. I'm actually surprised they even fly those S-300s. They're old as the shit of mammoths. But somehow our maintenance people make them fly still. And of course, modern air defense systems are definitely a better guarantee from new hits, new victims, and incidents when the missile lost control and flew in some odd direction. So do you think one of the results of yesterday's missile barrage will lead to the increase of air defense systems support? Not a single doubt in my mind. Can we talk yet about Any specific details of that? Probably not, but we can just say that the West usually reacts in sectors, so air defense is an issue, and they will likely react to that. They'll likely send a defense package, because these incidents, like the ones in Poland, they create a big problem. Not just for the West, but of course for Ukraine, which is the main target of it. And Sweden also said sending us 350 million, and among those, there might be Archer systems, a very good mobile artillery unit that is superb in counter-artillery attacks. It's on the wheelbase, it comes quickly, makes a shot, and leaves real fast. French Caesars showed themselves brilliantly on the front line, so I'm thinking Archers could be another good group. We can see some of that as well. 374,000 is watching us live. We've been on air for 25 minutes, and over 110,000 people clicked that like button. I suggest to continue discussing the topic of negotiations because it has some value. President Zelensky made a good statement. He says we are conducting a war for our lives, and if Putin wants to discuss anything about this war, I have nothing to hide. He can negotiate in public, in front of the camera. There is nothing for me to hide in this situation. Okay. Burns' visit to Zelensky after that Intel meeting in Ankara. We don't know some details, but it does look like there is some fairy diplomacy going back and forth. Talk to one side, and Burns, as the head of CIA, goes and visits Zelensky after that. Mark, there are always negotiations. Not a single side in military conflicts ever interrupts all negotiations. Even Nazi Germany was talking to the West from day one. They were talking to even Soviet Union, and Soviet Union had contacts with Japan. That always is the case. Politics is a very complicated activity. And the simplest example is an exchange of prisoners, right? Well, this is not the level of heads of state. Regardless, Mark, this outlines that there always is negotiation, even between the vilest of enemies, to exchange prisoners. Germans offered Stalin to exchange his son for prisoners. Then the scale of these negotiations may differ, but they exist as a fact. As a practice, they always are present. So the fact that people are talking shouldn't be making anyone afraid of the outcome. Our president made a clear statement. We are ready to negotiate, withdraw your troops, and we'll talk. And now he also trolled Putin and said, if you want to talk, let's do it publicly in front of cameras. I'm not hiding anything from my people. And we're open to the countries of the world to see what's going on. Those who are afraid, they would be afraid to do negotiations in this format. Burns already made a statement that they're not going to make any pressure on Ukraine. They made statements publicly, and I would say 2 years in public politics actually taught me that, unlike some stereotypes that people harbor, politicians, after making their public statements, usually indicate what they continue to follow through with. And even with some of the backstage comments. Now, imagine that we are getting pressured. And even if collective West decides to pressure us, what would they say? We will not give you arms so you would lose? Or we'll give you so little arms that there'll be some parity and Russia would have 4 occupied regions in Ukraine? What for? What do Americans need that for? However, situation, please talk when they appeal to us to say, please say something about negotiations because we need you to talk about that topic for our internal agenda or otherwise. So this one is likely exactly the ask. The sides are asking us to comment about negotiations, and we are doing that just fine. Words are not always resulting in actions, and actions not always result in strategy or caused by strategy. Even if, for example, tomorrow we stop fighting and say we will start negotiations, although we won't, this will only be part of strategy. It will not be the actual action. If we say that we are ready to sit down, it doesn't mean that we cease military activity. Remember the spring when we talked about that, and we've been talking and negotiating daily, and we've been traveling to Turkey to negotiate with them. And the war was raging. The war was going on. It was really difficult time for us. Some people may have forgotten, but May, June, July, even it was continuous attempts to force us to negotiate, at least in words. But at the same time, it was the time of first and second Rammstein, when they started supplying us with serious military support. And that was, of course, done on the background of the sweet talks about negotiations. And I'm addressing not you here, I'm addressing our viewers, the part of them who think that everything was bought and sold and paid for. Negotiations did not preclude us from fighting, did not preclude the West from supplying us with more weapons and armor. And frankly, we already did several successful campaigns. When the number reaches 5, there'll be no Russian troops left in Ukraine. So you think at this stage there is no real perspective, there is no real behind-the-scenes pressure and agreement. Mark, I understand I have some professional deformation, and the usual viewer may not be able to distinguish the word negotiations from situation when the war is stopped and things are conceded. I've spent 2 years in negotiating with Russia. I know the value of these negotiations. You can spit and forget. And I also understand that this is an important part of international political metabolism. So they need to talk about negotiations, and talks about talking about negotiations should always be present. And I suspect the more weapons they send, the more negotiation conversations will be happening around. Putin actually does that too. Whenever he talks about negotiations, he escalates the military conflict. So negotiations is one thing, and actual actions on the front is a completely different. This is part of the whole thing. It's like a big spectacle when, the heroes are fighting in the middle, and then the choir steps from behind and sings negotiations, and then they withdraw back. Then there is another action, another scene, and at the end of the scene, the choir comes out again and sings negotiations again. All right. We've been live for about 33 minutes. One last news that we'll discuss today. I think it's a small news, maybe just a blip on the radar, but there is something in it. Vice head of occupied Kherson region, Gubareva, was arrested on some corruption and grand larceny charges. And apparently, whatever, second person in the occupied region of the occupation administration, but they brought up a figure of charges of up to 16 million rubles. So, Mark, they're explaining to her that there is thievery and then there is unauthorized thievery. If you are doing that, you need to share, and she probably didn't. She probably improvised, and yeah, right now she's in Moscow, probably in prison somewhere. So that message is sent. You need to coordinate. Here are some results from Rammstein. Sweden is saying to send millions of support, including air defense system. Spain sending Hawk systems. Canada, more money and winter clothes. Germany, armored vehicles and monetary support. Germany is really changing. Greece is sending 155mm artillery shells. We're also probably getting Perun, that's a modified needle. old USSR system, merely made a statement that sounds as follows: Ukraine will not likely to be able to liberate the whole territory, including Crimea, but probability for Russia to win in this war is also nil, and Russia has lost in all their attempts. They lost all the goals and targets they set on this war, so they failed on all of their ideations. So how does one understand that, right? My just brings to mind the old phrase of my favorite actor. How do I understand that? So my opinion on that is probably according to some internal, electoral, or some other game between United States, Europe, United States, China, and Britain. For some reason, they need to talk about negotiations. That will pass. Just like our viewers are asking us, we're addressing it. It's better to address it than not, right? Well, yeah, this stream exists for the viewers, not for us. Since there is a question, we had to tackle it today, okay? We've been live for about 36 minutes. President commented that the main outcome of this Ramstein is increasing the fighting capability of Ukraine air defense systems, and it will be. You know, I think it's only drones that Moscow has from Iran. Nobody has seen surface-to-surface missile. Well, first of all, manufacturers of those weapons were sanctioned. Makfol Yermak are working behind the scenes. They continuously push for more sanctions. So the factories that manufacture Shahid drones, those and their ingredients, those companies are sanctioned. So I think Iran got all the messages about you should not be doing it. And I think that also somehow resulted in the West having to say a lot about negotiations. These missiles could have indeed added to tearing up our infrastructure. They could have achieved certain results. And they are not on the front. And Shaheds, they're also starting to fly in smaller numbers, right? At least twice. So you can consider that in order for Iranian missiles not to arrive to Russia, for this war, perhaps you need to say negotiations 20 times, and I think that may be what's happening. All right, we'll see what unfolds in the next 24 hours. We have over 400,000 watching us. About 150,000 click the like button, and we've been for almost 40 minutes live. Do we have a stream tomorrow? Yes, we do. Okay, we'll continue our discussion. We'll probably have more details on Ramstein. We'll see what's going on in Zaporozhye, because we're getting mixed signals. Some people are saying they are trying to advance, others are saying it was just an attempt. So there's a lot of fog of war. Let's take a pause till tomorrow and continue it then. I thank all the viewers who were with us today. Please do not forget to click subscribe button to Feigin Live and Olexiy Arestovich and Privateer Station. See you tomorrow.